Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the RealiTEA podcast. Today, we have someone who wears many hats: writer, teacher, programmer, student of philosophy, Sanskrit, languages, and more, Professor Vikram Chandra.
So many people around the world, all around the globe, watched his hit series Sacred Dreams on Netflix. Well, you all be happy to know that the crime thriller was based on Professor Chandra's 2008 novel of the same name.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor. We love your work and are so inspired by you. And like I mentioned earlier, are really bummed that we didn't get to meet you when we were on exchange in UC Berkeley a year ago.
Thank you. Thanks. It's great to be on. And I should just say, just call me Vikram. Professor sounds too grand for me.
Sounds good, Vikram. Thank you. Perfect. So let's dive right into it. I wanted to start off with this one question. They say that, behind every successful person, there's the hand of a strong woman. This is both a popular saying in, Hindi and also English. So your mother was also a writer and author of many different films, and she also did plays in Hindi. So what did her experience teach you? And do you think that it was her good genes that brought you here today?
Yeah, no, I mean, she was a huge influence, not just on me, but also my sisters, So one of my sisters is Anupma Chopra, she's the film critic and writer. The other one is Tanuja Chandra, who's a writer and film director. So all of us grew up watching my mom write. And I mean that literally, right? She used to write on the dining table on these big foolscap sheets of paper with a fountain pen, right? So to us, writing in any sort, but especially writing fiction and writing plays and television and later film, was just something that was part of our reality, right? Everyday reality. What it also taught us was how badly writers are paid, right? So in those early days, in New Delhi, when she was writing for Doordarshan, I mean, you could write an hour-long play for Doordarshan and get paid like, I don't know, 50 rupees or something, right? Which even by the standards of those times was very, very little. So what it taught us is that you can't make a living as a writer, right? Or at least this is true for 99.99% of the writers in the world, right? Even really, really famous and successful ones. So right from the start, there was this kind of double knowledge. And so it's amazing to me, and I think to all of us, that we've all managed to make a career and find a good life, right? Publishing and writing, doing what we love.
That's truly a shame, because I know how much value it adds to, say, my day when I read a good piece of writing, or how much thinking that goes on after, how did the writer even come up with this? Or there's so many layers to this one piece of statement. And to think that, they're not paid their dues literally in the form of, monetary incentive.
Well, it's always been true, right? At least for people who do a certain kind of writing, like, if I hope I don't sound grandiose, but if you do any kind of literary writing, right, especially, this has been true through the centuries, right? So if you look back into the pre-modern past in India or elsewhere, you'll always hear of poets looking for patrons, right? And then those days you used to end up in the courts of kings, or some noble became your patron, some duke or count or maharaja or thakur, right? And then you have to like act nice for those guys, right? Like you have to write, poems in praise of these people. You might hate them, but you still have to do it. Rosy roti and all that. so I mean, it's the sad fate of artists, I guess, in life in general. But it's not sad, because if you're doing what you love, at least if you can make a living, a decent living, and feed yourself and your family and your kids, you should be happy with that, right?
Definitely.
So yeah, as we all know, you are an awesome writer and a good teacher. So what has been your favorite teaching moment? And do you find it difficult to teach creative writing?
Well, it's hard to pick out one favorite teaching moment, because I mean, I've been doing it for so many years, and every semester there's something new. And I mean, this sounds like a cliche, and perhaps a sentimental thing to say, but I end up learning as much from my students as I teach them, right? And especially true, I think, nowadays, because at least in my teaching and, the way that my kids are learning here in California, students are encouraged to talk back, to ask questions, right? It's not something that gets you into trouble. But when I was growing up in India, this was not the case, right? You had to like learn what is in the book, you had to rattle it, and then, at exam time, you just had to regurgitate it on paper. I mean, I used to memorize like whole like answer, and we used to get, I don't know if you guys still get them, those kunjis, those answer helping books, right? Where they give you the questions and then they tell you, what the answers should be like, and then you just learn from those. And then, so anyway, I'm going on about this a bit because I hated it so much, right? So what happens, I think, in the best experience of the classroom, both for the teacher and the student, is when it actually works like a conversation, right? And you're actually asking opinions and you truly mean it. And my students challenge me all the time, right? As do my kids, actually. They're 11 and 13, and both of them will not let me get away with any shit, right? Excuse me. And I get called out, right? I mean, honestly, I'm not just saying this because they're my kids, right? So I think that's the best kind of environment, and I really enjoy it, right? I mean, I say to people that, if I won a lottery tomorrow, I would probably stop teaching. I could like concentrate on writing. But then when I reflect on it a bit, I think it's actually that would be very bad for me, right? Because like many writers, I have a tendency to retreat into this room, and I'm a pretty solitary person. And teaching actually draws you out. It forces you to sit down at a table. You go to the huge campus at Berkeley. There's lots of stuff going on. So I think it's very good for me in many, many ways.
Got it.
Yeah. I'm in the middle somewhere. So I study in Hong Kong, have studied in Hong Kong my whole life. So I know that, in India, education is very different. Like you said, tuitions after, lots of memorizing, lots of rattos.
Yeah.
For us, it's a little better. But when I was in Berkeley last semester, I saw a completely different side of education. Like you said, students are actually there because they want to learn. So much so that they would, introduce themselves to the professors on the very first day of class. There'd be a long line of students on the first day just waiting to introduce themselves and tell the professors why they're taking the course. And I really, really like that aspect of education. Maybe it's a Berkeley thing, but I just, for me,
I think here I don't know. I hope it's more than just Berkeley, and I hope it's changing in India. I mean, I get some indications that it is, although that depressingly happens, I think, most often from what I've seen in the expensive schools, right? The schools where the elite goes, right? Both at the school level and the college level, right? And unfortunately, I think at the where other people can afford to send their kids, it's still the same rote learning. There's intense amounts of competition, right? Like you were saying, these tuition classes, which are insane, right? And then the strain that puts on the kids, right? And then all of this is structured on this exam system, right? Which I think is so anyway. So I hope it changes, and I think people in India, from the conversations I've seen in the press and so forth, people are also aware that this is not good for the general growth of a culture and a society and an economy, right? So I mean, I keep hearing in the tech industry in India that people complain that, until recently at least, that we were the back office of the world, right? So a lot of the like actual coding, the grunt work, as it were, was being done in India, right? And I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but in some part it was true, right? And that we weren't getting many great startups out of India, success stories doing really original work, and this was because people were set in their way of thinking, right? The whole system trains you to be, to always be conservative, right? And I understand that, right? Like the economic pressure is heavy. It's insanely heavy. And you're always afraid that, like I was saying about my mother, right? She worried about us, beta, go become engineer, doctor ban jao, right? Because especially in the world that she grew up in, those were the only ways that you could make a decent living, right? So I think kids also absorb this correctly. So I hope things improve. Oh, and it's interesting. You live in which school did you go to in Hong Kong?
UST, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. That's where I'm at right now.
Oh, I see. My sisters, we lived in Hong Kong for a while, and both of them went to HKIS.
Okay. Hong Kong
And
International
then
School.
they came back after the 12th and then did the college in Bombay. So I know Hong
Oh,
Kong a very little bit. I think we were there for 3 years, but I was already in college in the States. So I used to go
oh,
back
that's so
and
nice.
visit.
Yeah. On school
Yeah.
level, I was in Renaissance College, which is another ESF school. So I think they were all part of the same English
Right,
Schools Foundation family. Yeah. That's so nice.
yeah.
Great. So you once also described yourself, or your 12-year-old self rather, as a weird little kid, which frankly we can all relate to at the age of 12. So my
Right.
question is, do you remember any of your made up science fiction stories that you had or the character cast that you created?
Yeah, I mean, I used to write, like it started with sci-fi, and I was heavily influenced by Isaac Asimov, right? I used to read incredible amounts of him. And there was a substantial like collection of Asimov in our school library, right? So that was one thing that really encouraged me. You know, I remember the broad outlines of the story, but I don't remember characters. It was a long time ago. And then I started writing at Mayo. I started writing nonfiction as well, right? I mean, sorry, fiction, but not sci-fi, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then I did write some nonfiction, and like I became the editor of the school magazine, the Mayur, and I used to write like editorials and like reports and essays.
That's fun. Do you prefer sci-fi or fiction? Do you have a preference?
No, I read pretty widely. I read everything. In fact, I was just inside at dinner time. I was reading a collection of sci-fi, right? And it's the
Mhm.
what is it? The best of the best. Gardner does this. He used to do the best science fiction of the year,
Okay.
and then he like from the entire series, which has been published for decades, he picked out what he thought were the best. So that's great fun. Um, I'm teaching a course this semester about which is called writing technology, right? About where the students and we read stories, both fiction, both uh, sci-fi and non-sci-fi stories, and try and think about how to imagine a better future, right? Which I think we should all be doing at this point. So I've been reading again, like even for that, I've just been assigning. I was drawing up my schedule for the semester, and so it's a whole bunch of sci-fi stories are going to be in that, along with other kinds of stories.
That's fun. Well, we wish we could take the course.
Yeah.
At some point.
I mean, it's Silicon Valley, so there definitely has to be technology here in
Yeah, yeah,
writing.
yeah.
Cool. So, do you ever get a writer's block, especially when doing a creative writing? How do you deal with creating a piece of work, but not having it meet your expectation?
Well, so touch wood. I'm really literally touching wood. I have never gotten the serious writer's block, which that actually sort of really terrifying condition where you literally can't write another word. What does happen to me is that I will reach a certain point in a book I'm writing, and I'll have the characters, I'll have the current moment, the landscape, and I have no idea what's going to happen next, right? I mean, absolutely no idea, because I don't make a plan before I write. I just start with characters and I discover the plot as I go along. So when that happens, what I do is I give myself a couple of weeks as a holiday, and then I try not to think about the manuscript at all, right? And then I watch movies, I read a lot, take walks, and then sometime during that, for the reasons that I don't understand, the solution will just click into place. It'll just appear, right? And I've heard lots of writers talk about this kind of thing. And I think in general, whatever kind of work that you're doing, if you're really a problem is annoying you, walking away from the problem for a little bit actually really helps, right? Because I mean, I think we tend to think that we think only with our brain, our conscious brain, but I think you work um, at all levels of your consciousness, right? The subconscious, the complete unconscious, right? And your body, right? You think with your whole body. So I think letting the mind work for a while outside of your control is actually really, really productive, right? The trouble with doing that is if you're on deadline,
Yeah.
right? And I hear this from programmers all the time also, right? There's sometimes you're trying to find a way to code something and it's really frustrating. You don't want to do it badly, like clumsily. Um, and then they also do this, but the problem is that you're working under tight deadlines and
Mm.
you have a boss, right?
Deadlines.
And who's harassing you for to get ahead.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, can I ask another question? This is something I'm really out of the Excel docs. So, what is your ideal writing location? So, I've seen some writers, they just go away from the world and they like disappear for 8 or 9 months and then they come back with a masterpiece. Or do you do it like, okay, this is my job, I'm gonna do it like every day, 10
Yeah.
100 words, then 500 words. So
Yeah, no, I treat it exactly like you said, like a job, right? I mean, I think waiting for inspiration is not a good thing. You shouldn't be doing that, right? You can't romanticize writing or any other kind of art making, right? So you show up every day or at your desk, or however often a week you can. You set aside a time, and then you're ruthless with yourself as far as you can be. And like you said, I do 400 words a day, right? And for me, that takes like a whole morning usually. And when I finish that, I feel kind of exhausted, and I know I've done a good day of work. And then if I write 400 words in an hour, then I just knock off, right? So it just and I mean, this is one of the cliched things that I say, is that writing is not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? So you maintain a steady, even pace from day to day. And 400 words is not much, right? It's just over a page of double spaced text, right? So, and amazingly enough, you keep doing it regularly enough, one day you finish, right? You actually have a full manuscript, right? Or maybe it's a very, rough draft, but still at least you have that, right? I had a friend when I lived in Washington, D.C., and he had a beautiful house with an office, large house. His kids were off at college, but he used to rent a room in a very depressing commercial building in downtown DC, right? And he used to ride his bike every day to that office. He would work there and then he would go back. And I asked him early on, why do you do this? And he said, like, exactly the same. I treat it like a job, right? And I have to get out of my home space in order to find that place where it feels like a job. Right?
Yeah, I think I definitely relate to that right now. I'm trying to study for my exams, and being at home, I just see my bed and I'm like, oh, a nap won't hurt. Or, my mom's making something really delicious in the kitchen and I can smell it constantly. So my focus is on that. But there's a
I mean, it takes a lot of effort, I think. I mean, in any work, but I mean, so this room, messy room you're seeing, is my office, which is like across we have a little backyard garden, and so the house, it's outside the house. And even out here, I'm always thinking about the fridge and the television inside. Nowadays, the great distractor, of course, is the internet, right?
yeah.
I mean, like there's like oceans of content waiting for you, right? Of every type for you to discover. Um, so it's very easy to get distracted, right? We live in a world of distraction. I mean, even on our phones, right? Twitter is such a time suck, right? And it can drive you nuts, And so I think developing a discipline of non-distraction, right, is I don't think just for anybody doing any kind of specifically artistic work, but for all of us in general, right? We live our lives in distraction.
Yeah, very true. So speaking of the internet, we had to come up with a fun segment in our podcast called the Spill the Tea segment. So this is where we ask our guests very fun, wacky questions, and they're usually rapid fire style.
Okay,
So
I might not be very rapid, but I'll try and answer.
no problem. So let's start with the first question. Paperback or Kindle? What's your preferred mode for
Oh,
reading?
I'm completely reading on electronically now. I mean, I have my tablets inside, and that's all I read on. I mean, the reason for me to do this is just because it's possible to be reading like more than one book, or carry a whole bunch of like research papers around, and then annotating them becomes much easier, in the sense that those annotations sync back to my reference program, right? And then I can find those. Um, and I guess because I'm kind of a geeky person, I was an early adopter of reading on phones and such like, right? Like very early when it just started. And actually, I think it must have been 2005 or 6, I was in London on a book thing, and at a party, I met the people who were just starting up the Kindle program then, right?
Wow.
And when from Amazon, and when they told me they were doing this, I was so excited, right? Because, I mean, it seemed, I mean, even then, back then, the company had a lot of technological know-how, right? And I knew that they could do this, execute it in a way that would actually work, right? Which it obviously it has. I mean, this was before they became the world devouring monster that they are now, right? So I mean, so yeah, I mean, I I respect people who say that they want to read on paper, but I can't do it. But I should say one thing, is that when I want to edit, when I finish a section of the manuscript, actually back here, you see this pile of paper? That's the fiction I'm working on now, right? So of course I wrote it all, using software, but when I finished a section I wanted to edit, I print it out, and then I sit outside and read it on paper and with a pen edit it, because it kind of, you get a new physical sensation about the text, and you can see it, right? Because otherwise it becomes invisible, right, to you.
With the digital world, that happens a lot. But it's very refreshing to hear you say that, because a lot of writers, they always talk about the nostalgia that they have of opening a new book, and just that raw smell of paper that is freshly printed, or at least freshly opened. So that's a very refreshing take. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it, right? I completely understand it. I guess I don't feel particularly nostalgic. The other thing is that actually we're going to talk about it in that class that I was talking about, is that we tend to think of things that we grew up with, that were created before we were born, as somehow natural, right? And we tend to forget that books are a technology too. They're absolutely technological, right? And especially printed books in modernity, right? So they're a means of mass production of text. They had a huge influence on the way that texts are absorbed. They killed the whole manuscript culture in India and elsewhere, right? So the people at the beginning of the print revolution, certainly not everyone saw it as benign, right? People had nostalgia for manuscripts as well, right? And the same kind of accusations that are made now about digital media were made about books, right? In the sense that they were a source of misinformation, or anybody can write a book now. Like we say, anybody can write a blog post and spread misinformation, and like, things lacking in intellectual rigor and all of that stuff. So I can't remember who said it, but like, everything like I was saying, everything that was created before we were born, we don't call it technology. Technology is only things that were created in front of us, right?
So did you watch Sacred Games? Please summarize your reaction in one word.
It was awesome. I mean, even though I say so myself, right? I mean, I was attached to it as an executive producer. So which meant that I helped the writers as they came up with the drafts, and when they were thinking about it. But in the end, I had no control over it, right? And I didn't want to, right? Because when you translate from one medium into another, you've got to make radical leaps, which I think they did. And I have to say, like, when the book came out early on, it was optioned by a very good film company, and they wanted to make it into a movie, right? And I told them before I had lunch with the one of the main guys at the studio, at the company, and I said, I don't understand how you're going to make this book into a movie, even if it's 3 hours long, right? And they still wanted it, and they had a very amazing British writer take it on, and but it never got done, right? And so I was like, when the TV series started happening, I was still like, okay, you guys are really brave for doing this. And I think in that translation, they did an amazing job, right? By making radical changes from the book to the series.
So on that note, do you prefer reading books or watching film adaptations of those books?
I guess both. I mean, I don't know. It's a hard question because I mean, sometimes I think especially books you are really attached to and you're really passionate about, you have a tendency to like really start getting into a rage when you see the movie, right? Or the series, because you always think that it's a lesser thing, right? Because it changes what your first experience of reading that book was like, right? Because
sure.
you loved it for certain reasons,
Yeah.
and those reasons might not be there in the
Yeah.
adaptation. But I mean, especially since Sacred Games was adapted, I'm really interested to read the books and then see the adaptations to just to figure out like how they did it, right? Because that is obviously an art all by itself, right? And it's a difficult craft once you start thinking about it. So I've been doing that recently, actually, in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And how has it been so far? Have you seen any major differences, or do you think it has detached you from the experience you had when you were
No,
reading?
I just watched. So I don't know if you've seen these movies, the Jack Reacher films with Tom Cruise. Um, so they're really good escapist entertainment, right?
Okay.
So like Cruise plays a ex-military policeman, and he's always coming into town lone guy, and then he's a badass, and he finds some bad guys who done something really bad, and he kicks ass, right? And, and he always wins. So those movies are based on a very long-running series of novels, right? Thrillers, which are crisply written. They're fun and exciting. I guess you could call them formulaic, but always the same. It's the same plot, right? Like cowboy rides into town and he shoots a bunch of people, right?
Saves the day.
And the world is put right. So those two movies were based on two specific novels, and again, I thought they did a very good job, right? So I was watching with an eye to see how they had left out certain plot lines, how they combined some characters, left others out completely. What changes had they made? And so I'm not sure I could do it, but it's an interesting thing to watch people do.
Yeah.
Got it. To UC Berkeley. What's your favorite library in UC Berkeley? I mean, there are 8.
I'm
Best
very
libraries.
bad at names. I've been on this campus for more than a decade. I'm going to forget. What's the main Doe, right?
Yeah.
Doe's the main one.
It's the Moffat, right? The one near the Campanelli.
Yeah. Oh, Moffat. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's the
I love
Moffat.
the Moffat. I like the going down experience into the first time I went, I was like, okay, this doesn't seem like a very big library, right? Like some university libraries I had seen, because those are like 6 floors high, right? If you go to Columbia, you'll see this enormous thing rising up, old, 80-year-old building or something. And then when you walk into this one, then you realize that it all goes downwards into the ground.
Yeah.
And it keeps going down for what, like 4 or 5 floors?
Yeah.
Right?
Many floors. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's beautiful inside, right?
Yeah. And all the
Yeah.
libraries have their own story. They're all different in their own way, which is great. And a final question, we had to bring our star friend from UC Berkeley, Oski, into the picture. So have you had an interaction with Oski, and what has your favorite one been?
Wait, Oski? Oski cat, like at the library?
No, Oski the bear, which is the mascot.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, okay. So I was still thinking about libraries, right? Because the catalog system is called Oski cat.
Oh,
right?
okay. Named after Oski.
No, I have to say not even one. I mean, I see the bear all over the the logos and all over the place. That statue on campus, right? Of the bear. I guess I haven't ever been to one of the Berkeley football games, right? Which is where you would see Oski make the most conspicuous appearance. I have seen just before the football games and so forth, they have the guy dressed up, or the person, woman, whoever dressed up as a bear walking around.
Yeah.
Starting to get people all hyped up. Yeah. So I've seen Oski there.
Yeah, that's most commonly where you find Oski in his true element.
Basketball match.
Well, with that, unfortunately, those were all the questions we had for you, Vikram. Thank you so much for your time. It was really great speaking to you. And again, needless to say, we are both very large fans of your craft. So thank you for bringing us true writing and entertainment at its finest.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been a pleasure having you on, guys. And have fun and stay safe, and maybe we'll see you some other time at Cal.
Yes, thank you.